I'm Nicodemus, a member of the Sanhedrin, the governing council of the Jewish people. From the beginning, my religious colleagues felt threatened by Jesus. For me, I will never forget the night I went to Jesus' dwelling. By the time we finished our conversation, his piercing wisdom had moved me in deep places. So when the council began to talk about arresting Jesus, accusing him of blasphemy and stirring up trouble, I protested that we owed him a proper hearing, like we would, offer to anyone else, but no one wanted to listen. When they moved next to plotting his death, I am ashamed to say my fear of rejection and concern for my own safety won the day. I kept silent. The Sanhedrin chose to arrest Jesus at night and then put him on trial immediately. Our own law is clear that there shall be no trials at night. How ironic. On one hand, they were condemning Jesus for breaking the Sabbath law. On the other hand, they were completely unconcerned about breaking the law themselves. So, on the night Jesus was arrested, I sat waiting for the defendant with the rest of the rebellious colleagues. My heart beat fast as I sat, knowing his arrest would be kept secret and that the outcome of these proceedings would be death. But again, I was at the time too intimidated to raise an objection. Suddenly, the doors opened and guards roughly pushed Jesus into our dimly lit room. His hands were bound, the hem of his robe dirty and torn. I clenched my fists. Why couldn't anyone else see how wrong this was? So our mock trial began. His aides had been earlier sent to search high and low for anyone who would testify against Jesus, regardless of whether their words were true or not. The council now pressed in, trying to surface evidence of Jesus' heretical teachings. Witness after witness then came in to testify against him, but their accusations, they were outlandish. They even contradicted each other. My colleagues seemed restless, and I wondered that they might choose to go ahead with their guilty verdict even without proper evidence. Well, eventually 2 witnesses were found who could agree on something. Jesus had claimed he would destroy our beloved temple and restore it in just 3 days. I shook my head. Herod the Great, the master builder, had taken decades to build the temple at untold expense and labor. So how could Jesus tear it down and then rebuild it by himself? All this in 3 days. Preposterous, my colleagues yelled. I had to agree it would only be later that I would realize that, just like his phrase, born again, his prediction of a destroyed temple carried a deeper meaning. The temple he spoke of was, of course, not the building, but his body. Its tearing down and building up pointed to his imminent death and resurrection. Of course, even if we had understood Jesus' true meaning, the court would have considered Jesus being the temple of God equally preposterous. All our treasured memories and beliefs of God's presence were inseparable from the physical building of the temple. In the midst of it all, the rabbi did not bother responding to even one of our allegations. He knew the law as well as any of us and could have pointed out the illegitimacy of the whole proceeding or decimated the testimony of these witnesses. Instead, he spoke not a word. His strength and his calmness somehow made me feel that perhaps we were the ones on trial and he was the judge. You who are under the impression that Jesus was rightly found guilty under Jewish law, think again. In the first place, no serious inquiry into the truth took place that night. The Sanhedrin looked not for justice, but simply sought to rid themselves of this messianic impostor once and for all. Jesus intentionally submitted himself to our legal sham. The trial was just a necessary step in his Father's higher plan than that. One day, many of us would be born again. Our verdict and his death would be anything but an accident.